The spaceship glided silently through the violet clouds of Zithara's atmosphere. Captain Elias Kane stood at the viewport, his hands resting on the railing, watching the alien world grow larger with every passing second. Unlike Earth, Zithara was not filled with blue oceans and green forests. Its landscape shimmered in colors he had never seen before, emerald mountains that glowed faintly, rivers of liquid silver, and skies painted in streaks of deep purple and gold dot. Elias had been a human guard for most of his life, trained to protect diplomats and leaders across dangerous sectors of the galaxy. He had seen war, rebellion, and betrayal. But Zithara was different. This world was alive in a way that almost felt sentient. Even from a distance, he could sense the power radiating from its core, from the palace that floated atop the largest plateau like a crown. "Captain Kane," said Lieutenant Maris, Elias's aide, her voice cutting through the hum of the ship's engines. "We are about to enter the airspace near the palace. The Queen's guards will take over from here. Remember, your mission is protection and observation. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." Elias nodded. He had read the briefings. Queen Thalira was not just the ruler of Zithara, she was legendary among the stars. Her intelligence, beauty, and ruthlessness were whispered about in human colonies, and yet, she was also known to be fair to those she respected. Elias had no idea what awaited him inside the palace. The landing was smooth. As the spaceship touched down, the palace doors opened automatically, revealing a crowd of alien attendants and guards. Their skin shimmered like polished stone, and their eyes reflected every light in the room. They were tall, elegant, and terrifying at the same time. Elias stepped out of the ship, straightening his uniform. His boots clicked against the glass-like floor, drawing the attention of every observer. Lieutenant Maris followed him, keeping a careful distance. Then, he saw her. Queen Thalira stood at the top of the grand staircase, her figure regal and commanding. She had 4 arms, each adorned with bracelets of glowing crystals. Her skin was a smooth shade of iridescent blue, and her eyes, large and multifaceted, stared directly at him. Elias froze for a moment, not out of fear, but because she stopped moving too. For the first time in his life, Elias realized he had been noticed not just as a human, but as something familiar. Queen Thalira's gaze did not waver. She tilted, her head slightly, studying him as if she were looking at a painting she had seen long ago. The court held its breath. Aliens whispered to each other, exchanging confused glances. The moment stretched, heavy and strange. Finally, Elias bowed politely. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am Captain Elias Kane, assigned as your human guard. It is my honor to serve and protect." Thalira's eyes widened slightly. For a moment, her hands froze in midair, the bracelets sparkling in her stillness. No one in the court had ever seen the Queen hesitate. Her reputation was that of a fearless and decisive leader, yet here she stood unable to move. Her gaze locked on Elias. Elias, oblivious to the stir he had caused, continued, "I have come from the United Earth Alliance. My mission is to ensure the safety of all interstellar delegates visiting Zithara. I am ready to follow your orders." Thalira's voice, soft but commanding, finally broke the silence. "Bring him forward." 2 of her attendants stepped forward and gestured for Elias to follow. He walked up the stairs, careful to keep his composure. Every step seemed to echo in the grand hall. The walls were made of a crystal-like substance, reflecting every flicker of light, and the ceiling arched high above, showing a panoramic view of the swirling violet skies. The closer he got to Thalira, the more he felt a strange pull. There was something in her presence that reminded him of people he had known, but he could not place it. Yet Thalira's expression grew more conflicted. She moved her head slightly, and for the first time, her lips parted in something like recognition. When he reached the throne, she spoke again. "You resemble him." Elias blinked. "Resemble whom, Your Majesty?" he asked cautiously. "The one I lost," Thalira whispered, her eyes misting over in the soft glow of the palace lights. "A human, sire, from long ago. He was brave, He saved me once, and then he was gone. Elias did not know what to say. He was a guard, trained for diplomacy and combat, not for unraveling the mysteries of alien royalty or grief. Yet something in the Queen's voice struck a chord within him, a deep sadness mixed with awe. The court murmured. The attendants glanced at each other nervously, unsure if it was appropriate to speak. Thalira, however, waved them away. "Leave us," she commanded. "I will speak with him alone." Maris shot Elias a glance. He nodded, slightly understanding he was about to enter dangerous waters, metaphorically speaking. The attendants filed out, leaving only Elias and Thalira in the grand hall. Thalira descended from her throne, moving with a grace that defied her forearms. She stopped a few feet away from him, studying his face, his posture, his every movement. It was unnerving and mesmerizing at the same time. "You are not him," she finally said, her voice calmer, though her eyes betrayed the conflict within. "And yet, there is something about you. Something I cannot explain." Elias nodded slowly. "I am not your lost companion, Your Majesty. I am only Captain Kane. I can, however, serve you with loyalty and protect you and your realm to the best of my ability." Thalira studied him for a long time, as if weighing every word. "Humans," she said softly, almost to herself. "You are stronger than you appear, braver than you should be, and yet so fragile. Why do you risk yourselves so easily?" Elias shrugged. "Because it is what humans do. We fight, we protect, we survive. Sometimes that is all we can do, but it has kept our species alive." Thalira tilted her head, intrigued. "Perhaps that is why I feel something, seeing you." A silence fell between them. For the first time, the Queen allowed herself a private moment of vulnerability in front of another being. Elias realized that her power was not just in her military might or intelligence, but in her restraint, her control. And yet here she was human in a way, human in her sorrow, human in her longing. Just then, an alarm echoed through the palace. One of the outer sensors had detected an unknown vessel approaching Zithra's atmosphere. Thalira's composure returned instantly. Her arms moved gracefully, signaling the guards to take positions. "Captain Kane," she said sharply, "come with me. You will observe and assist where necessary. Your presence may prove interesting to our allies." Elias followed without hesitation. As they moved through the palace corridors, he noticed intricate patterns on the walls that seemed almost alive, shifting slightly as they passed. Bioluminescent vines curled along the floors, lighting the way. It was unlike any palace he had ever seen. "You have a sharp mind," Thalira said, her voice quieter now, walking beside him. "Your species, humans, you think differently. I can feel it already." Elias glanced at her. "I suppose every species has its own way of thinking. But humans, we survive by noticing what others overlook, by taking risks others fear to take." Thalira's eyes softened. "Then perhaps that is why I feel hope seeing you. Perhaps you are a reminder of what I lost and what I may yet find." They reached a control chamber, filled with holographic displays and alien technology. The approaching vessel appeared as a dark shadow on the screens. Thalira gestured to Elias. "Observe and advise," she said. "I want to see your human approach in action." Elias stepped forward, scanning the readouts. He noticed something the alien guards had missed. A weak point in the approaching ship's trajectory, a detail that could be exploited. His instincts, honed from years of combat and strategy, kicked in immediately. Thalira watched him, her expression unreadable. Yet inside she felt a flicker of something she had not felt in decades. Trust. Not in a human, not in a stranger, but in this man. This man who looked like her lost love, yet was entirely his own person. The alarm continued to sound. The palace shuddered slightly as the sensors detected the vessel entering orbit, and Elias realized that his role on Zithra was going to be far more complicated than any mission he had ever faced. And for the first, Time in his career he felt that being human, being different was exactly what would make the difference. Queen Thalira, standing beside him, remained frozen for just a fraction of a second longer, lost in memories and reflections. But then, the leader in her took over, and she turned sharply, issuing orders to the guards. Prepare for inspection. Captain Kane observed closely. And human. She paused, her eyes flicking to his. Do not fail me. Elias nodded, understanding perfectly. In that moment he realized that Zithara, with all its beauty, danger, and mystery, was now his responsibility to protect, and that perhaps, just perhaps, humans had a power here that even aliens could not comprehend. The first step of his journey on Zithara had begun. The palace of Zithara was alive with movement, yet it felt strangely still. Captain Elias Kane walked down the long corridors, flanked by alien guards who regarded him with curiosity and suspicion. Every surface reflected his human figure, and every whisper seemed to carry rumors that he did not understand. Queen Thalira's words from earlier repeated in his mind. You resemble him. He could not stop thinking about it. Who was this man she had lost? Why did she see echoes of him? In Elias? The questions were heavy, but Elias had no time to dwell on them. His mission was clear. Observe, learn, and protect. The first task of the day was training with Zithara's elite guards. Elias entered the central training hall, a massive dome with floors that absorbed sound. The walls were lined with glowing patterns that shifted as the combatants moved. He could see the aliens' weapons were advanced, energy blades, plasma nets, and hovering shields. But what struck him most was their rigid style. Every movement was precise, predictable, and rehearsed. Step forward, human, barked Commander Rill, the chief of the palace guard. His 6 arms moved in perfect symmetry as he demonstrated a series of defensive maneuvers. We will see if your species can survive our training. Elias smiled faintly. I will try my best, he said calmly. The session began. The aliens attacked in synchronized waves, and Elias dodged, parried, and countered in ways they did not expect. He did not have the raw strength of the Zitharan guards, but his human instincts, honed over years of battle and unpredictability, allowed him to survive. Rill frowned. You fight differently. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Sometimes unpredictability is survival, Elias replied. The other guards exchanged glances. Humans, they realized, did not follow the strict patterns that Zitharans relied upon. This made them unpredictable, but it also made them adaptable. It was a strange combination the aliens had never seen before. After training, Elias was escorted to the palace gardens. It was an expansive space filled with luminescent plants, vines that floated mid-air, and fountains that flowed with water glowing softly in colors that defied description. Thalira awaited him there, her posture relaxed yet regal. You survived. The first trial, she said, her voice calm but carrying a subtle edge. Most humans would have failed immediately. Elias glanced at her. It is not strength alone that wins a battle, Your Majesty. Observation, adaptation, and timing matter as much as power. Thalira's gaze softened, and for a moment, she allowed herself to remember. She remembered her husband, the one Elias resembled so closely. She had met him decades ago when he was part of a diplomatic mission. He had been human, brave, clever, and full of life. He had saved her from a rebellion that could have destroyed Zithara. And then he had disappeared, lost in the stars, leaving. Her grief-stricken but alive. Seeing Elias brought back those memories vividly. The same height, the same posture, the same way of holding himself with quiet confidence. It was uncanny. She had tried to suppress the feelings, to remind herself that he was gone, but the resemblance was too strong. You remind me of him, she said softly, almost to herself. Elias, unaware of the depth of her emotion, asked, Remind you of whom, Your Majesty? Thalira's eyes flickered with pain and memory. She shook her head. No matter, she said finally. You are your own person, Captain Kane. I will not confuse you with anyone else. Despite her words, Thalira felt a strange warmth in her chest. She had ruled Zithara for decades, relying on logic, discipline, and strategy. But seeing Elias, she felt emotions she had thought were long buried. Grief, longing, hope, and perhaps even trust. As they walked through the garden, Elias noticed a small fountain carved with intricate patterns. Water flowed over tiny ridges, producing a soft, melodic sound. "This is beautiful," he said. "Did you design it?" Thalira glanced at him. "No, my husband did." The words struck Elias. "Then perhaps your husband's legacy is still here, in more ways than one." Thalira nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her memories. She had spent decades focused on duty, suppressing emotions for the sake of the throne. But Elias's presence reminded her of a life she had almost forgotten, a life filled with trust, courage, and simple human warmth. Later that day, Thalira decided to test Elias further. She summoned him to the council chamber, a massive hall with floating platforms and holographic displays. Alien diplomats from neighboring systems had gathered for a routine discussion, and Thalira wanted Elias to observe how he would handle political intrigue. "Captain Kane," she said, "watch carefully. You may need to advise me soon. This council is not accustomed to human reasoning." The council meeting began. Aliens debated over resources, defense, and trade. Their discussions were formal, structured, and full of protocol. Elias listened quietly, noting patterns and inconsistencies. When a critical point arose, an error in resource allocation that could spark conflict, he spoke up. "Your approach is logical," Elias said, "but it ignores human behavior patterns. If this continues, it may lead to tension that your calculations cannot predict." The room fell silent. Aliens were not used to outsiders pointing out flaws in their logic. Thalira observed, impressed. Elias's perspective was simple, human, and yet powerful. It highlighted a strength her species lacked. Intuition and adaptability. One of the diplomats, an 8-armed Zitharan named Vryn, frowned. "You assume human methods apply here. You know nothing of Zitharan society." Elias shook his head calmly. "I do not assume. I observe. I reason. And I suggest. It is up to you to decide whether it is useful." Thalira's eyes flickered with approval. She saw in Elias a rare gift, the ability to bring fresh insight into a world that relied heavily on tradition. For the first time, she considered what humans could contribute beyond their physical presence. After the meeting, Thalira escorted Elias to a balcony overlooking the city. Zithara shimmered beneath the twilight sky, towers glowing with energy and streets humming softly with activity. "Your species, humans, you adapt in ways we do not," she said thoughtfully. "You survive not because you are the strongest, but because you are willing to think, to change, to act when others cannot. Perhaps this is why I feel something when I see you. Perhaps, you are a reminder of what my husband embodied, yet in a way that is uniquely human." Elias remained silent for a moment, taking in the beauty and the weight of her words. "Your Majesty," he said finally, "I am only here to serve. If my presence helps Zithara, I will do everything I can. And if I remind you of someone lost, I am honored, though I am not him." Thalira smiled faintly, a rare expression that softened her usually commanding features. "You are not him, Captain Kane. But perhaps that is better. You are your own person, and you may yet teach me something new." The night fell and the palace lights glowed like stars. Elias sat quietly in his quarters reflecting on the day. He had expected a mission of protection, perhaps diplomacy, but Zithara was proving far more complex. He had encountered a ruler who was both powerful and vulnerable, a court that was curious and cautious, and a world that challenged every instinct he had ever relied upon. And yet, he felt a spark of purpose. Humans were often underestimated, considered fragile, predictable, and limited. Here on Zithara, he realized that their true strength lay in their adaptability, creativity, and empathy. Traits that could change the course of events in ways even the most advanced alien civilizations could not anticipate. Meanwhile, Thalira remained in her private chambers, staring at an old hollow projection of her lost husband. Elias's presence had stirred memories, feelings, and questions she had long buried. Could a human, a stranger, truly help her see a path forward? Could humans, with their unpredictable ways, bring something new to her world? She did not know yet. But one thing was certain. The arrival of Captain Elias Kane had changed Zithra forever. In the quiet of the night, two lives, one human, one alien, were linked in ways neither fully understood. And in that connection, the seeds of trust, friendship, and something greater were quietly taking root. Tomorrow, the real challenges would begin. Tomorrow, Elias would discover just how different and how powerful humans could be on a world ruled by tradition, discipline, and the memory of loss. 4. Now the palace rested. The stars shimmered and Zithra waited. The next morning, Zithra's palace was alive with energy. Aliens moved through the halls, their multiple arms carrying devices, reports, and weapons. Captain Elias Kane had grown accustomed to the palace's rhythm, but nothing could prepare him for what was coming. Captain Kane, Queen Thalira's voice echoed from the throne room. An unexpected patrol report has come in. One of our outer scouting stations has detected a fleet approaching Zithra. Their numbers are small, but we cannot underestimate them. Elias straightened. Do we know their intent? Thalira shook her head. Not yet. It could be a routine survey, or a prelude to attack. You will accompany me to the command center and assist with strategy. I want to see your approach to this situation. The command center was a vast chamber, filled with holographic displays and floating projections of the planet's surface. Alien commanders moved with efficiency, issuing instructions to distant outposts. The room buzzed with tension, and Elias could feel the pressure immediately. Thalira gestured toward the main display. Here is the incoming fleet. Predictions from our scouts show their path, speed, and possible weapons. What do you suggest, Captain Kane? Elias studied the holographic projections carefully. The alien calculations were precise, but he noticed something they had missed. Their formation is rigid, he said. They rely on synchronized maneuvers. If we can anticipate their rhythm, we can create openings they will not expect. I suggest small, rapid attacks on the lead ships to break their coordination. They will not be able to adjust quickly. The alien commanders exchanged glances. That is risky, one said. If we fail, their fleet will strike hard. Perhaps, Elias admitted, but humans succeed by taking calculated risks. Predictability is a weakness. They will assume we follow patterns, because Zitherans always do. Thalira studied him, her eyes narrowing. You are proposing an unorthodox method. Are you confident? Elias nodded. Yes, but we will need cooperation and speed, and we may have to act before they even arrive in range. Thalira's lips curled slightly, in approval. Very well. We will follow your plan. Prepare a strike team. For the first time, Elias realized the weight of responsibility he carried. His human instincts, his ability to think differently, were now critical to the defense of an entire world. And for the first time he felt the eyes of the Queen watching him, not just for obedience but for brilliance. Outside, Zithra's skies shimmered as the alien fleet approached. The palace's defense ships, sleek and powerful, moved into position. Elias took his place among the commanders, issuing instructions that combined human intuition with Zithran precision. As the first enemy ships came into view, Elias's strategy began to unfold. Small strike teams darted in unpredictable patterns, attacking lead vessels and disrupting the formation. The aliens were caught off guard. Their rigid tactics could not respond to the human-designed maneuvers. Thalira watched from the observation deck, her multiple arms folded. Impressive, she whispered. The humans truly think differently. The battle continued. Zithra's fleet moved with precision, following Elias's suggestions, while the enemy struggled to adapt. In one bold move, Elias directed a strike on the central command ship of the enemy fleet, targeting its communication hub. With their coordination broken, the enemy ships scattered in confusion. Elias breathed heavily, adrenaline coursing through him. He was human, limited in strength compared to Zitherans, but his mind had turned the tide of the encounter. He glanced at Thalira. Her eyes shone with something he could not name: pride, admiration, and perhaps relief. After the enemy fleet retreated, Thalira descended to the battlefield command platform. She approached Elias, her expression unreadable at first, then softened. "You have done what our finest could not," she said. "Humans, you have a gift. You see beyond patterns, beyond rules. You see possibilities." Elias shook his head. "I only do what comes naturally. I notice what others overlook and I act. That is what humans do." Thalira nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is why I feel something when I see you. Not only because you remind me of him, but because you embody the qualities he admired: courage, ingenuity, and adaptability." Elias hesitated, then said, "I do not wish to replace anyone from your past, Your Majesty. But if my skills can serve Zithera, then I will give everything I have." For the first time, Thalira smiled fully. It was not a polite smile nor one of formal duty. It was a genuine expression of respect and trust. She had ruled Zithera for decades, relying on strict logic and power, but Elias had reminded her of something she had almost forgotten: hope. Over the next few days, Elias continued to demonstrate the human advantage. He solved problems the Zitheran commanders had struggled with for years. He adapted defenses, improved training drills, and suggested strategies that relied not on raw strength, but on creativity and insight. The aliens began to notice. Guards whispered to each other about the strange abilities of humans. Commanders reconsidered old tactics. Even Thalira's advisors, skeptical at first, began to see the value in Elias's perspective. One afternoon, Thalira summoned Elias to a private garden chamber. The air shimmered with bioluminescent light, and the soft hum of alien energy filled the space. "You have done more than survive," she said quietly. "You have changed the way my people think about humans. Your species. It is stronger than I believed. Not in muscle or technology, but in spirit and mind." Elias looked at her. "That is what humans bring to the table. We are fragile, yes, but we endure. We think differently. We adapt. That has kept us alive, even when others have counted us out." Thalira nodded, her eyes distant for a moment. "I see now why my husband admired humans. He understood what I did not. That strength is not only in the body or in weapons, but in thought, courage, and heart." Elias felt a strange warmth at her words. He had expected suspicion, duty, perhaps even fear from the Queen. But now, he saw respect, and more importantly, trust. Later, the palace was shaken by news of a small rebellion on one of Zithera's distant mining colonies. Thalira turned to Elias. "Captain Kane, I want your input on this. Can human methods help resolve it?" Elias nodded. "Yes. I suggest infiltration and negotiation rather than force. Observe their patterns, identify their fears, and use that to create cooperation. Violence can escalate. Human history teaches us that. Persuasion and adaptability often win faster." Thalira listened carefully, impressed by his reasoning. Together, they devised a plan, blending human ingenuity with Zitheran resources. Within days, the rebellion was pacified not by bloodshed but by strategy and understanding. The palace began to see humans not as fragile creatures, but as unpredictable, resilient allies. And for Thalira, Elias became more than a guard. He became a symbol of something she had longed for, the reminder that hope, courage, and adaptability could shape destiny, even in a world as structured and disciplined as Zithera. That evening, Thalira allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She stood in the garden, gazing at the floating lights above the city. Elias's presence had stirred memories of her lost husband, but also something new, a sense that the future, uncertain as it was, could hold more than grief. Elias, meanwhile, walked through the palace corridors, observing guards, citizens, and diplomats. He realized that humans often survived not because they were strongest, but because they could see what others overlooked and act in ways that were unpredictable. That insight had saved lives and changed a world. On Zithera, no less. The bond between human and alien deepened quietly. Thalira respected Elias's abilities, and Elias understood the weight of her responsibilities. Together they began shaping a new approach to leadership, defense, and diplomacy on Zithera, one that combined human adaptability with alien precision. As night fell, the palace lights shimmered like stars. Queen Thalira gazed at Elias from her chambers, aware that his influence was growing and that humans, though physically weaker, brought a kind of strength Zitherans had never known. Tomorrow, the challenges would grow larger, the threats more dangerous, and the lessons more profound. But for now, Elias Kane had proven one undeniable truth. Sometimes the human advantage lay not in weapons, technology, or raw power, but in courage, creativity, and the ability to see what others cannot. The warning alarms echoed through Zithera's palace like a chorus of danger. Captain Elias Kane rushed to the command center, his mind already racing with possibilities. This was no longer a minor skirmish or rebellion. It was a full-scale threat. A massive alien fleet from the rival empire of Varkath had entered Zithera's space. Their ships were larger, faster, and more heavily armed than anything Zithera had faced before. Queen Thalira stood at the central console, her four arms moving swiftly over the holographic display. Every action was precise, yet her eyes betrayed the tension she felt. Years of rule had taught her to rely on predictability, on careful strategy and protocol. But this enemy was unlike any she had faced. "Captain Kane," she said sharply, "I need your assessment. The Council insists on a direct attack, a formation strike that follows traditional methods. I am hesitant." Elias studied the approaching fleet on the display. "Your Majesty, the Varkath will expect that. A direct assault follows their assumptions about Zitheran strategy. If we do the same, we risk heavy losses." The Queen's lips pressed together. "Then what do you propose?" Elias took a deep breath. "We need to use what humans excel at: adaptability and unpredictability. I suggest splitting our forces into smaller mobile units that can strike their key ships individually, disrupt their coordination, and retreat before they can retaliate. We turn their strength into a weakness." Thalira's eyes narrowed. "That is risky. If any unit fails, it could cost lives." "Yes," Elias admitted, "but a rigid approach will cost more. Humans survive by taking calculated risks, using strategy that the enemy cannot anticipate." The Queen paused, her mind a whirlwind of memories and duty. She thought of her lost husband, the human who had once saved her from a rebellion decades ago. He had taught her courage, and now, Elias reminded her of the same lesson. She could trust him, but her council, her advisors, might not. "Very well," Thalira said finally. "We will act on your plan. Prepare the strike teams. I want you to lead them." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was no ordinary mission. Lives depended on his strategy, on human ingenuity, and on the coordination between species that had rarely worked together. The preparation was intense. Zithera's ships were advanced, but the pilots had never executed human-style maneuvers. Elias spent hours working with them, demonstrating quick changes in direction, rapid flanking attacks, and timing that relied on intuition rather than rigid calculation. During the training, one young pilot asked, "Captain Kane, how can we possibly survive against Varkath if we break formation?" Elias smiled. "Because unpredictability is a weapon. If they cannot anticipate us, they cannot fight us effectively. Trust your instincts and mine." Thalira observed from the command deck, her heart both anxious and inspired. Elias reminded her of her lost husband, yet he was entirely his own person. His human courage, combined with their alien technology, could tip the scales in ways she had never imagined. When the fleet finally appeared over Zithera's skies, the scene was breathtaking and terrifying. Ships of all sizes shimmered in the alien light, their engines leaving streaks of energy across the atmosphere. The enemy moved as one, disciplined and relentless. The palace fleet activated in response, forming a defensive perimeter. But then Elias's strategy came into play. Split into units. Elias commanded. Target their lead ships, hit and retreat, confuse them. Do not stay in one place too long. The ships moved, smaller units darting unpredictably among the enemy. Zitharan pilots, initially nervous, followed Elias's directions, their trust in human intuition growing with every maneuver. Lead enemy vessels were struck repeatedly, their coordination disrupted. Chaos spread through the Varkath fleet as the unpredictability of human strategy clashed with their rigid formations. Thalira watched in awe. Remarkable, she whispered. Humans, they think differently. And it works. The battle raged, for hours. Zithara's forces, guided by Elias's insight, avoided heavy casualties while inflicting significant damage on the enemy. Yet the Varkath were persistent. Their largest command ship advanced toward the palace, threatening to strike. Directly at the heart of Zithara, Thalira's advisors urged her to follow protocol, launch all remaining forces in a direct strike. But she hesitated, remembering Elias's plan. She looked at him, her eyes filled with both trust and concern. Captain Kane, she said, the command ship approaches. What now? Elias focused on the display, calculating the risks. We draw them in. Use the palace's defensive grid as a trap. Then our mobile units attack from all sides. Timing and coordination are everything. If we succeed, the command ship will be neutralized without risking the rest of our fleet. Thalira nodded. Do it. The trap was set. As the Varkath command ship advanced, Zithara's defensive grid activated. Energy beams cut across the sky, guiding the enemy into a confined path. Elias's strike teams moved in perfect synchronization, hitting key points on the ship while avoiding exposure. Explosions rippled through the atmosphere, and the command ship's movements became erratic. Finally, with a coordinated assault, the ship was neutralized. The enemy fleet, seeing their leader destroyed, began to retreat. Zithara had won, not through brute force, but through adaptability, strategy, and the human advantage. Thalira stood in the command center, her heart pounding. She turned to Elias, her expression softening. You have done what our traditions never could. You have shown me that strength is not only in power or precision, but in creativity and courage. Elias shook his head. I only do what humans do. Observe, adapt, and act. You gave me the opportunity to help. Later, in the quiet of the palace garden, Thalira reflected on the battle. Elias had reminded her of her lost husband, yes, but he had also shown her something greater. Humans, though fragile in body, possessed a unique strength of mind and spirit. Their courage and ingenuity could turn even the most dire situations into opportunities for victory. Elias, meanwhile, walked the palace corridors, exhausted but satisfied. He had earned the trust of the queen, the respect of the guards, and had proven that human strategy could succeed where rigid traditions failed. The people of Zithara, too, had begun to see the value of humans. Whispers spread among the palace, staff and citizens, about the human guard who had saved the planet from destruction, not through power but through clever thinking, courage, and adaptability. That night, Thalira allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She stood alone, gazing at the stars above Zithara, thinking of her lost husband. Elias was not him, yet he reminded her of the same qualities she had admired: bravery, cleverness, and an unwavering sense of duty. And now, with the Varkath threat temporarily neutralized, she realized that Zithara's future, and perhaps even the galaxy's, could be shaped by the collaboration between humans and aliens. Elias's presence had done more than protect the planet. He had changed the way Thalira saw strength, leadership, and even hope itself. The bond between human and alien had grown, and it was clear that the days ahead would be challenging, but also filled with the possibility of extraordinary achievement. As Zithara settled into an uneasy peace, the queen and her human guard prepared for what would come next. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers, mysteries, and opportunities, and together Thalira and Elias would face them, with courage, intelligence, and trust in each other. For the first time in decades, Thalira allowed herself to hope, not for the past but for the future, and in that hope humans and aliens alike would find a new path forward. The skies of Zithra were calm for the first time in weeks. The Varkath fleet had retreated, and the palace buzzed with activity as soldiers repaired ships, engineers fixed energy grids, and diplomats resumed their discussions. Yet, amidst the calm, a new energy pulsed in the heart of the palace, a sense of possibility, a recognition that Zithra had survived, not only through power but through courage, creativity, and cooperation. Captain Elias Kane walked through the central corridors, observing the palace staff. They no longer whispered about him in suspicion. They watched with respect, nodding in acknowledgement. He had proven that humans were not weak or fragile. They were unpredictable, adaptable, and capable of extraordinary feats. Queen Thalira stood on the balcony overlooking the city, her iridescent skin glowing softly in the twilight. The battle had tested her leadership, her decisions, and her faith in others. And through it all, Elias had remained steadfast, an anchor, a strategist, and a reminder of the human qualities her lost husband had once embodied. Captain Kane, Thalira said as he approached, her voice carrying a mix of formality and warmth. Come with me. He followed her silently, noting the rare softness in her movements. They walked through the palace gardens, where luminescent plants swayed gently in the evening breeze. The air smelled faintly of the glowing flowers, and the fountains whispered a melodic hum. It was peaceful, yet heavy with meaning. You have changed Zithra, Thalira said quietly, stopping near a fountain, not just through strategy or bravery, but by showing us what humans can bring. Courage, intuition, adaptability, traits my people have long undervalued. Elias shook his head. I only do what humans do naturally. Observe, adapt, act. That's how we survive. It seems Zithra is just beginning to understand that. Thalira studied him for a moment, her eyes reflecting both memories and newfound respect. Your presence has reminded me of someone I lost. My husband. He was human, brave, clever, and full of heart. Seeing you, your mannerisms, your courage, it brings back both pain and hope. But you are not him, Captain Kane. You are something new, something alive in this time and place. Elias nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. I am honored, Your Majesty, and I promise to serve Zithra to the best of my abilities, not as a replacement, but as a guardian and an ally. Thalira smiled faintly, a rare gesture. Then rise, Captain Kane. From this day forward, you shall be more than a guard. You will be my human liaison, protector of the realm, and advisor in matters that require a human perspective. The words sank in. Elias had not expected such recognition, yet it felt right. He had faced danger, guided strategy, and earned the trust of one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy. Now he would have a permanent role, bridging human ingenuity and Zithran precision. Over the following days, Elias worked closely with Thalira to integrate human-inspired strategies into Zithra's governance. Training drills now included adaptive scenarios that required creativity and quick thinking. Diplomats and council members learned to value unpredictability and insight over rigid adherence to tradition. It was not easy. Some Zithrans resisted, clinging to the old ways. But Elias remained patient, demonstrating through action that humans were capable allies. Slowly, the palace began to shift. A new era of collaboration emerged, blending the strengths of both species. Thalira observed Elias closely. He reminded her of her lost husband, yet he was entirely his own person. Human in his flaws, human in his courage, human in his vision. It was a living reminder that the past could inform the future, but it did not define it. One evening, as the two walked through the palace balcony overlooking the city, Thalira spoke. You know, I never expected a human to change the course of Zithra's history. Yet here you are, brave, clever, and relentless in your duty. Elias glanced at her. I only did what was necessary. Humans survive because we notice things others overlook. Sometimes that makes a difference. Thalira nodded thoughtfully. It does more than that. It inspires hope. You have reminded my people and me that strength comes in many forms, not only in weapons or rigid discipline, but in courage, creativity, and heart. The night sky shimmered with alien constellations. Stars reflected off the palace domes, and the city below hummed with renewed life. Zithra had survived, and in that survival a lesson had been learned. That humans, often underestimated, could change even the course of worlds. Over time, Elias grew into his new role. He trained Zitharan soldiers in human tactics, advised on diplomacy, and developed strategies that combined instinct and intelligence. The planet flourished, becoming stronger, more flexible, and better prepared for threats from across the galaxy. The Queen, once a ruler who relied solely on structure and protocol, began to embrace the lessons humans brought. She incorporated adaptive thinking into her strategies, consulted Elias on difficult decisions, and even allowed moments of vulnerability she had never permitted herself before. Their bond deepened, not romantically, but as a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Thalira could rely on Elias in ways she had never relied on anyone else. He was her bridge to the future, her reminder that courage and ingenuity could coexist with wisdom and duty. One day, Thalira invited Elias to the palace observatory. From there, they could see Zithara's moons, the floating cities, and the sparkling energy streams that powered the planet. "Look at it," she said softly. "All of this survived, thrived, and changed. Not just because of my leadership, but because you reminded me and my people that strength comes in many forms." Elias smiled. "You already had the power, Your Majesty. I just reminded you of what humans can do. Together we can protect Zithara and guide it forward." Thalira nodded, her eyes reflecting both pride and hope. "Yes, together." In the months that followed, Zithara became a beacon of interstellar cooperation. Human and Zitharan teams worked side by side. New technologies were developed, blending human creativity and alien precision. Diplomats from distant worlds arrived, curious to learn from a planet that had survived against overwhelming odds, not through sheer might, but through ingenuity, courage, and trust. And always, Elias Kane remained at the heart of it. He was more than a human guard. He was a symbol, proof that humans could achieve greatness not just through strength, but through thought, empathy, and action. Queen Thalira often reflected on the strange coincidence that had brought him to her palace. He resembled her lost husband, yet he was no replacement. He was a reminder of the past, a link to the lessons she had learned, and a guide for the future. As the sun set over Zithara, casting golden-purple hues across the floating gardens, Thalira turned to Elias. "You have done more than protect this planet, Captain Kane. You have changed it, and perhaps changed me as well." Elias nodded, humbled. "I only did what humans do best, but together we can make Zithara stronger than ever." The Queen smiled softly. "Stronger, yes, and perhaps wiser too." In that moment, the palace of Zithara felt alive in a new way, not just as a place of rule and power, but as a place where trust, courage, and adaptability could thrive. Humans and Zitharans alike had learned that strength was not only in arms or strategy, but in mind, spirit, and the bonds they built together. Elias Kane had arrived as a human guard. He had faced suspicion, danger, and uncertainty. He had reminded a queen of what she had lost and shown an entire world what humans could achieve. And in doing so, he had helped to shape a new era. A future where humans and aliens could stand together, where courage, creativity, and trust could guide entire civilizations, and where hope had been reborn. Not from the past, but through action in the present. The stars above Zithara glimmered, reflecting the promise of that future. Captain Elias Kane and Queen Thalira stood together side by side, not bound by the past, but united in the possibilities of what lay ahead. Zithra had survived. It had grown, and a new era had begun.